Good afternoon. Welcome to SteelMaster Live on Facebook. My name is William. I'm William Swafford. I'm one of the design specialists here at SteelMaster Buildings. I've been here for many years, and I do a lot of the custom design work, international business sales, and general commercial sales work.
Hi, I'm Scott Matthews. I'm a building specialist. I mainly work with residential folks with homes, workshops, garages. And then today what we're going to do is cover the benefits of using a Quonset hut, and at the end of this you can leave questions for us and we'll be taking them at the end of our discussion.
You can leave questions anytime now if you want to have questions, get them in there now, but we're going to get to the questions as we get through the discussion.
At the end.
Don't wait on your questions. So you were going to talk about the benefits a little bit and then go from there?
Well, SteelMaster's, the gauge of steel, there's different gauges of steel. We have steel from 22 gauge all the way down to 12 gauge. And the gauges of steel are determined by the architect depending on the use. If it's just a garage or a Category 2 building, which is an occupied dwelling, or if it's a business, people are going to be working in 8 hours or more. And then seismic zones, snow loads, wind loads, all that's factored in to the gauge of steel that is being used. And one of the huge benefits of corrugation, there's no trusses, posts or beams inside, so they're clear span, and that's one of the favorite things our clients tell us is why they get these buildings, that clear span capability.
Right. A lot of people ask why, why is the panel corrugated so deeply? That's one of the big questions we get. How deep is the corrugation? First, we carry two different lines. We have our standard arch section, which is 7.5 inches deep. We also have what we call our large arch section, which is 9 3/4 inches deep. So the depth of the corrugation, like you can see in this panel here, the depth is the depth in the corrugation in this direction. So again, 7.5 is the typical panel you would find in most of our buildings. The question of why so deep a corrugation or why is it arched, that's what gives it its strength. These corrugations and these changes, these little crimps and those angles are what give that panel its strength to be able to hold up to all those snow loads all over the place. Like Scott mentioned, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we understand where your building's going. Every county in the United States has its own snow load requirements and wind load requirements and things that have to be met to be able to put a structure there, especially for an occupied dwelling. Once we know exactly where the building's going, we establish what the load is in that county, and then we go to our design work and make sure that the building model that you're looking for, the size, width, height, shape that you want from our selection will meet those wind and snow load requirements for where it's going. And again, that's where the thickness of steel comes into play. That's where the grade of steel comes into play. We buy a very heavy grade or a higher grade of steel than most in the industry. We use a grade 80 steel on all of our 22 gauge and 20 gauge material, and that there's a little difference in the tensile strength. So between having a stronger steel material, having a couple of options to choose from in the depth of corrugation in our panel, that gives us ability to kind of go a little bit wider, a little bit taller, and hopefully be a little bit more economical for our customers.
Hey Greg, fire resistance is a huge plus with these buildings. Steel, it's not going to burn. We've actually had clients that had their buildings up that had fires inside of their building very close to their home, and the fire was contained within that building, and those people were extremely grateful for it.
I think the big question that we get regarding the fire resistance, a lot of times, especially if you're considering a occupied dwelling, a home or a workshop that you want to finish out completely, a lot of the code requirements are going to have a fire code rating on them. So you have to have a material in there that's got a rating on it that's fire resistant for a certain amount of hours. Our panel, of course, is steel. Steel doesn't burn, so it's considered non-combustible. They can't rate it, so you're not going to have a fire rating on that on the panel itself. And what we would recommend there is you're either going to have insulation material put in, and then you have a coating you can add to that. A lot of people, the simple way, like it's done in most houses, is to use a gypsum board or a sheetrock material. If then you do that, you're going to obviously have to fur out the building and put that in there. Those are things, again, you have to make sure you understand in your particular county what the requirements are and how you can get there. But as far as just saying, is our building fireproof? Of course, it's steel. Steel doesn't burn. Like Scott said, there's been buildings in the forest where the forest is burned all around and it's protected the stuff. There's been probably more than that, buildings that have fires caught inside in a workshop or something, a kerosene heater, whatever, catches everything in the building on fire, but it maintains that fire inside the building, and the home next door doesn't get damaged, thankfully. So that's a good point about the steel panels.
And another big plus is you don't have to worry about termites or other destructive bugs. I mean,
that's right.
Termites love wood, and they're not even going to take a look at steel. So
that's true. That's true. So again, what we talked about earlier, the coating is kind of an important factor on our steel. SteelMaster uses the Galvalume Plus coating. It's it was the AZ180, I believe, coating that's the thickest available in the industry. It allows us to put a warranty on the panel, and our warranty comes from the mill that makes the panels for us. It's pretty standard. Most metal buildings use it when they have a raw finish. It's going to be a Galvalume Plus finish out there, and you'll see that everywhere. It's very long lasting. It's got a very tight spangle. You can see how neatly it looks, almost like aluminum, and that's the Galvalume part of it. There's a little bit of zinc, a little bit of aluminum in that coating that essentially protects that raw steel from the elements, keeping it from rusting and looking bad and for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and an added benefit of the Galvalume Plus is after the fact the EPA tested it and found out the inside of the building was 20% cooler than the outside of the building when the sun's rays were hitting it. Just makes it a lot cooler, especially if you're going to be spending time in there in the workshop, and definitely if you're going to make a house out of it, save on your energy bills.
Yeah, and I mean it is actually an Energy Star rated coating, and essentially what they refer to that is the albedo effect, where like a lot of buildings, you see commercial buildings using white roofing material when they do the membrane roofs. Same purpose there is to reflect heat off of the building, and our panels work really well for that. The Galvalume has a pretty reflective coating on it that actually essentially sends some of that heat back away from the building. It looks like we have a question from Greg. It says 22 gauge is 0.03125 thick, 20 gauge is about 2 sheets of paper thicker. Is there much difference between the strength of the two? There actually is, a good bit of difference in the strength of the two. Of course, I'm not the engineer, and we have documentation obviously for us to work with as design guys to work through that. I can't speak to the exact difference in thickness or the strength allowed for that, but I know that what we do is we want to make sure what the county requires. We're going to make sure whichever model we use is in the appropriate gauge. We've got computer models that help us understand that strength, and we also have an engineer on staff. We're one of the companies that does this, that actually staffs and employs multiple engineers. We have 3 guys that are at work every day, all day, helping us do the drawings, keeping the questions answered, making sure that we're meeting all those requirements, and that's very important when you're doing something like this. You need to have a set of stamped, engineered drawings to get your permits in almost every county in the country.
And another big plus is the prefabrication of these buildings. The holes are already pre-punched in the arches, as you can see, and they're not drilled out, they're punched, so there's no burrs in there, so you don't have to worry about your nuts and bolts getting caught up in there. And then it's a one-size nut and bolt. I mean, that just allows a lot of people to put these buildings up with a limited skill set. You don't necessarily have to be a Class A contractor, and a majority of the people buying the buildings put them up themselves with help or family or friends.
Yep, that is the way to go. So we talked about the prefabricated. The next thing I think on our list here, we were going to just kind of briefly chat about the pre-cut end walls that save you time and money. When you buy a SteelMaster building, if you buy the end wall system, now a lot of people don't, especially for an occupied dwelling, for like a home, most people are going to build what we call a custom end wall, and that's built by the customer. You would frame it with whatever you want it, whether it be stick framing or steel studs to get the framing in place, and then of course you can side it or sheet it with whatever it is you want it to do: log cabin, brick, block, stone, siding, vinyl, anything that you want to. Maybe you're trying to match a garage to a structure in the yard already, or you just want to have the perfect look on the front of your cabin. You can do that all yourself. If you did buy the steel end walls from us, now we're going to provide you with whatever you need for a framed opening for an overhead door, and we would actually cut out the opening. We're going to put in a header beam, door post, all the framing members you would need to then call the local door guy and have him come in and put his door in. Tracks on steel jams is all you need to tell him when you're doing that. We also offer window frames, man door framed kits with a door frame lock set and all, where you will end up cutting the openings for small openings like a window or a door, man door. But of course, all the panels are cut to meet the corrugation and the shape of the structure, and we send some trim kits that come out to tuck them into, and then again, the big openings are cut for you. So just when you call in, kind of get a sense of knowing what you're looking for your door size. Talk to your salesperson about the end walls, if you want them, if you don't want them, if you want us to put openings in them, or what you want to do there, and we can do it. We can do whatever you want for any of that stuff.
For this next part, we're going to talk about some of our cooler projects, just how some of these folks use these arches. The first project I want to talk about is I had a client in Ohio who had a massive fire. He had 5 buildings on his property, and 4 of them were completely destroyed by the fire, including his house. And he took his garage, converted it, and lived in it for a year until he bought these 2 buildings. And one's a garage, and then one's a house. And he connected the walkway with one of our carports, split it up and connected the walkway. And what you see on the face of both those buildings are porcelain tile, and I look forward to getting interior pictures from him. The next project is a hangar for a pilot that used to be a F-14 Tomcat pilot here in Virginia Beach, and he retired and moved down to Florida. And he has a personal aircraft that he was very, very concerned about the wind. He had 140-mile-an-hour wind load down there in Florida, and he knew he wanted a SteelMaster building just because he knew the engineering was going to be behind it. And he calls in all the time, and he's extremely grateful. And then the third project is a pottery facility. This gentleman is a pottery artist, and he makes his own pottery. He's got the kiln outside, but he wanted a unique structure. That's called our T model. And what you see in that picture on the side of it is poplar bark shingles, and then on the face of it, there's wood on there that he actually took a torch and ebonized it. But that's a really cool looking building. We get a lot of comments. There's a good blog story on that client. But William.
All right, yeah, I'm going to grab a question from Jennifer. Jennifer, hi Jennifer, how are you? She asked us, how do Quonset huts hold up against hurricanes and water leakage? I'll go back to what I said a little bit earlier about about making sure we know where the building's going. If you're going to Miami-Dade, down in Florida where they have 170, 180 mile an hour winds, or if you're going to, Tempe, Arizona, it's a very different kind of design that we consider. So again, we'll look at the wind load requirements, and of course, we're going to design for that. So the hurricanes, typically, we survive really well in the hurricanes. We get a lot of calls after hurricanes and from customers who have seen one of our buildings that made it through the storms. Again, you can never design for everything. The problem with hurricanes a lot of times is that they bring trees down and things like that. If it's just the wind, typically you're going to have very little problem with a SteelMaster building. The problems that come when big things fall on the buildings or things of that nature happen. And that's where you usually get leaks. When the building isn't compromised, if the building stays in shape and just blown by the wind, no matter which way the wind and rain is blowing, you're not going to get leaks from that kind of thing. Typically, it's when a tree falls and then bends some of the panels and open up a gap between the overlap of our panel that looks kind of like that. Once that gets compromised, you might find leaks, but more important to protect your boat, your house, your family, than to worry about a little bit of leak when you're in an actual hurricane. And that's the story that we hear time and time again. Customers call back and say, man, everything that I thought was valuable, including my family, we put inside that building and sat out a 12-hour storm in there with it beating us to death. But everything's there. The house had a lot of problems, windows blew out, whatever, but the SteelMaster building stayed intact, and we get a lot of thank yous after the big storms. And we tend to sell, a few buildings after every big storm from somebody who lived down the road from one or saw one or something like that. So again, very important to understand for us where exactly that building's going. We want to make sure that we design for that and account for that. And a lot of times, we'll have customers ask, can you make it heavier? Well, certainly we can over-design the structure if you'd like. If you want to live, with a little bit more steel between you and the elements, it's certainly a good idea to consider. I always tell them, let me give you a price for the next heaviest load or the next heaviest gauge of steel, and just to give you a sense, maybe that little bit of investment is not a big amount that's going to be a difference over 30 years or however long you plan to live. in a structure like this. So I'll talk about a couple projects now. Sorry to go so long on the hurricane thing, but the first one is called the Oklahoma City Fitness, is what we called it. It was a fitness structure built by American Energy Partners for their workers and on their campus in Oklahoma City. And these guys came to us and said, what we want to do is use your panel, just the typical panel, as a guard against hail, because of where we live. We're worried about the building being damaged with hail, and so we actually designed a custom panel specifically for this project. It was a complete one-off. It didn't have holes in it like our typical panel. We created a different fastening system for it that was actually kind of proprietary, so I'm not going to talk about that. But this building was overlaid with our steel panels. They were 18-gauge panels, and we used them specifically for the aesthetic of it, as well as to protect that main structure from any hail damage that may come through. Our company has gone through extensive hail testing. We've done the high-velocity projectile testing for Florida. So we have a lot of information to back this stuff up, and we can talk to you in great specifics about any of that if you call in and want to go down that road. The next project I want to talk about is for a company in California. They're called Cubes Depot. Cubes Depot does conversions on containers. So they take big container, sea container shipping boxes and convert those into offices or hospitals or homes or anything that you really want. A lot of workspace and job site trailer things that they do. You can just drop it on a truck, bring it in there, and plug and play with them. So they wanted us to put a roof on their facility, and we put a big steel container cover, we call those, at their site so that they can show their customers and help get the word out. This is a way to make it. We do a lot of these type structures, 30, 40 feet wide, gives you a great workspace, covered shade for your agricultural equipment. If it's a short-term project where you're going to be there for 3 years, we can do them fully enclosed as well if you want to have end walls in them and use them to build offices in the boxes and things of that nature. I did one in New York City for a tunnel project where they put 4 boxes up and made offices in the 2 of them, and then workshops in the other 2, and had a big space to work under. It was fully enclosed with garage doors. It was great. So that's something that we do a lot over these container covered roof systems. The last one I'm going to talk about is one that I'm very, very proud of. This is what we call the Arc House. It was designed by an architect out of Manhattan named Maziar Baruz, and Maziar had a client coming from the West Coast that wanted to move to the Hamptons and wanted to live in something that was different than anything else around it. So Maziar designed this house using our steel arch panels. We did the main living space that you see in that photograph there. It's about 68 feet wide and about 24 feet tall, and I want to say about 30 or so feet deep. And that's the main living space where the kitchen and all the things are. And then, of course, you can kind of tell that it goes down below. It goes out back for some different stuff. I believe it was about a $2 million house. I also believe it was up for sale a couple of years ago. So you might look around in the Hamptons. Maybe you'll see that $2 million SteelMaster dream home you've always wanted.
Just to add to that Arc House is a big referenced building. I mean, it's a huge percentage of people that buy houses to create Quonset homes reference that picture, and they don't necessarily get that size, but that's one of the catalysts. Looking at that picture, which makes them want to create a Quonset home. And you guys have any more questions?
I think that's probably it. Then we didn't get a lot of questions today. I hope some people were watching, or I hope some people watch this after the fact and can gain a little bit of knowledge from it. We're trying to do this every couple of weeks just to give you guys a chance to ask us questions or to come on and learn a little bit about the SteelMaster buildings. Of course, you can always call 888-769-3182, or you can log on to steelmasterusa.com at any time. Certainly feel free to ask for Scott or William if you want, or of course we've got many other salespeople and design guys on staff that can answer any questions or help you with your project. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, and on the next SteelMaster Live, we're going to question the boss. He's going to be sitting in here, and you don't want to miss that conversation. We're going to be pulling back the curtain and letting you in on some of the steel industry secrets that other companies will never tell you. And we'll be posting that date and time on our social channels, so please look out for that.
Thanks a lot again. Have a great day.
All right, thanks.